A Prairie Wind by Audrey Sinclair. The setting sun painted long shadows across the Wyoming Territory's vast prairie, where Isabella Montgomery stood on her ranch's weathered porch, her dark curls dancing in the autumn breeze. The year was 1875, and at 23, she had inherited both freedom and responsibility in equal measure. Her father's passing left her with 500 acres of prime grazing land, a modest herd of cattle, and a legacy she was determined to honor. The distant thunder of hooves drew her attention to the horizon. A lone rider approached, his form silhouetted against the amber sky. Isabella's hand instinctively moved to the rifle propped beside the door, a necessary precaution in these untamed lands. As the rider drew closer, she recognized the distinctive gait of Alexander Blackwood's stallion. Her grip on the rifle loosened, but her pulse quickened. The mysterious rancher had arrived in the territory 6 months ago, purchasing the neighboring spread with cash and keeping largely to himself. Rumors swirled about his past like dust devils across the prairie, but Isabella had learned to trust her own judgments over town gossip. "Miss Montgomery," he called out, removing his hat as he dismounted. The gesture revealed thick black hair touched with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of prairie sage. "I hope I'm not disturbing your evening." "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, noting how his presence seemed to shrink the vast landscape around them. "What brings you to my door at this hour?" He stepped closer, boots creaking on the wooden steps. "I've come with a proposition, one that might benefit us both." His voice carried the refined edge of an Eastern education, at odds with his sun-weathered face and calloused hands. Isabella arched an eyebrow, maintaining her composure despite the flutter in her stomach. "I'm listening." "The railway's coming through these parts," he said, producing a folded document from his vest pocket. "They're offering contracts for cattle transport to Chicago, but they're only dealing with operations that can guarantee substantial herds." Understanding dawned like the first rays of morning sun. "You're suggesting we combine our herds?" "A partnership," he confirmed, those sage green eyes holding hers. "Equal shares, equal say in operations. Your father taught you ranching from the ground up, knowledge that would be invaluable." Isabella studied him, searching for any hint of deception. In the 6 months since Alexander's arrival, they'd developed a cautious respect, exchanging practical assistance when needed. She'd noticed his methodical approach to ranching, the way he treated his workers fairly, how he handled his stock with patience rather than force. "Why me?" she asked directly. "There are larger spreads in the territory." A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Because you're the only rancher I've met who can read the weather and the way prairie grass bends, who knows every water source on your land by name, and who treats ranching not just as a business, but as a calling." The sincerity in his voice stirred something in her she'd thought long buried, a yearning for partnership that went beyond business ledgers and cattle counts. But experience had taught her to temper emotion with practicality. "I'll need time to review the contract," she said, reaching for the document. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, sending an unexpected warmth through her hand. "Of course," he nodded. "Take all the time you need." Over the next few weeks, as autumn painted the prairie in golds and russets, Isabella and Alexander met regularly to discuss terms. Their conversations, starting with business, gradually wandered to personal territories. She learned of his years at Harvard, his decision to abandon a law career for the freedom of the West. He discovered her passion for literature, the dog-eared volumes of Shakespeare and Whitman she kept by her bedside. Their partnership agreement was signed on a crisp October morning, witnessed by the town's notary. That evening, they shared a celebratory dinner on Isabella's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades that rivaled any Eastern artist's palette. To new beginnings, Alexander raised his coffee cup, his eyes reflecting the dying light. "An old wisdom," Isabella added, thinking of her father's constant reminder that the land would provide for those who respected it. The winter months brought challenges that tested their partnership. A brutal storm threatened their combined herd, forcing them to work side by side through bitter nights to protect their investment. In those long hours, sharing warmth and determination, the careful distance between them began to dissolve. One evening, as they thawed out by Isabella's hearth after checking on a newly calved heifer, Alexander turned to her with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low and measured, "about how this partnership might expand beyond business matters." Isabella's hands stilled on her coffee cup. "Have you now? You must know that my admiration for you has grown far beyond your ranching abilities," he continued. "Your strength, your intelligence, your innate understanding of this land, they've captured more than my professional respect." She met his gaze steadily, though her pulse raced like a spring creek in flood. "And what do you propose to do about that, Mr. Blackwood?" He moved closer, slow and deliberate, as approaching a skittish colt. "I propose we consider a more permanent arrangement, one that would join not just our herds and lands but our lives." Isabella stood, moving to the window to gather her thoughts. The prairie stretched before her, vast and familiar, yet somehow different now, full of new possibilities. "Marriage is not a business contract, Alexander," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "No," he agreed, coming to stand beside her. "It's a partnership of a different kind, one based on mutual respect, shared dreams, and," he paused, choosing his words carefully, deepening affection. She turned to face him, noting how the firelight softened his features. "And if I were to consider such a partnership?" His hand found hers, warm and steady. "Then we would build something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch, but a true home, a legacy worthy of the land we both love." Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, painting the prairie in wildflowers and fresh grass. Isabella and Alexander were married in a simple ceremony beneath the old cottonwood tree where their properties met. Their wedding celebration brought together two ranch families into one, with cowboys from both spreads sharing stories and songs late into the night. As the evening stars emerged, the newlyweds stood on their porch, now their shared home, watching the moon rise over their combined lands. The prairie wind carried the sweet scent of spring grass and possibility. "Any regrets?" Alexander asked, his arm secure around her waist. Isabella leaned into his embrace, thinking of the journey that had brought them here, from cautious neighbors to business partners to something far more precious. "Only that we didn't consider this partnership sooner," she replied, smiling as his laugh rumbled through his chest. Their story became part of territory legend, how two independent spirits found in each other not just love, but a shared vision of what the West could be. Their ranch prospered, their partnership deepened, and their legacy grew as vast as the prairie that had brought them together. In years to come, their children would learn the same lessons about respect for the land and the value of true partnership. And on quiet evenings, when the setting sun painted the sky in familiar golds and purples, Isabella and Alexander would still stand together on their porch, their hands clasped, watching the prairie wind dance across the grass that had witnessed their love story unfold.